Let's go ahead and get started. So we'll say hello, dear ones. We're so glad that you're here and have joined us for this very special meeting of the Center. It's a joy that you've honored us with your presence and are part of our spiritual family today. My name's Joe Irwin. And what's exciting is not only that this is sort of an unusual program, but we realized that we have participants from 11 different countries. In addition to the U.S., we have people joining us from Australia, Canada, Denmark, England, Germany, Ireland, Norway, Peru, Spain, and even one of our panelists is joining us from Turkey. So welcome, welcome. It is really a unique and special time together. For those who are new to the center, I do want to mention our website has lots of wonderful resources. It's simply contemporarymysticism.org. And also there's groups you can join, weekly, monthly groups and participate in, resources, but particularly videos of a lot of our past speakers. In fact, 3 of our panelists today have been to the center before. So if you go to the website and look at our video section, you can see another whole program or 2 with them. So if you like what you're seeing and hearing today, be sure and check out the website, and you can find other programs and videos of some of our panelists. So I think it's our goal at the center to be a partner with you in your spiritual journey. That's what we're really passionate about. And I think it's an honor that we're together doing this. So if you feel what's important and that you want to support the center, there's opportunities on the website to do that as well. So any type of, you can join the center or support it, and any sort of support and contribution is received with gratitude and humility. So welcome. If you're new to the center, we hope you can feel our warm, genuine welcome to you, and want you to feel a member of the center family. So now, as we've looked forward to this special event, it's unique and special to me because one of our slogans at the center is a doorway to many paths. And often we're interviewing or talking with one person, but today we have 4 different voices. And just as each one of us in a way is on our own unique journey, each voice in which we receive messages from the divine is unique and may be aimed at one particular soul out there on their journey. So it's so exciting to be able to bring together 4 different and unique voices, and that's just wonderful. So without further ado, I want to begin to introduce our panel. The first is a newest to our center. I want to welcome Chelan Harkin. Chelan, welcome. It is so wonderful to have you here. Chelan is not only a poet and a mystic and a mom and a next door neighbor, but she's a voice of spiritual wisdom through her poetry that's often been compared to Rumi and Hafez and other amazing spiritual leaders of the time and voices of the time. Her first book with her poetry is called Susceptible to Light, and she just recently published a new book that's called Let Us Dance, The Stumble and Whirl with the Beloved. So you can learn more about Chelan in addition today to go to our website, which is simply chelanharkin.com. We welcome back Mari Perron. I say back because she's been at the center at least a couple of times doing workshops and programs for us. We've invited her to consider the center her East Coast home. Yeah. But as most of you know, Mari is not only the first receiver of the world-renowned A Course of Love, but she's also the author of many books and writings. The most recent is Marari, The Way of the Marys, which brings to light and lifts up the resurgence of the feminine voice in this pivotal time in which we're living. So I think that book is a must read for those on the spiritual journey. So again, learn more about Mari at her website, mariperron.com. Next, I want to welcome back Mary Reed, because again, like others, Mary has been to the center at least a couple of times with programs and talks. Now, Mary's journey started a little bit differently than some of ours. She sort of started as a person with no religious or spiritual background and was working as a corporate executive and a world traveler. And all of a sudden, she began to receive some spontaneous visions or messages and began to consider herself an unwitting mystic. I guess it's the fact that she wasn't looking for spirit, but it was looking for her. And so it's so wonderful to know about her story, which you can read about in her first book, Unwitting Mystic. And then she's just come out with a brand new book called Divine New Being, a sublime guided passage to the end of hell. So I'm looking forward to that. Her website is entitled unwittingmystic.com. I think she's in the process of updating it, but nevertheless, you'll find books and information on there so you can get better acquainted with Mary. Now, one more thing I have to say about Mary, what we're doing here today is in many parts thanks to Mary, because it was her idea a couple of years ago to have a panel. She said, why don't we get a variety of spiritual voices together and do a panel? And we talked about it, looked at it, and then the pandemic came along and one thing and another, but Mary was persistent and we liked the idea. And so all this time we've been working on it. And it's thanks to her, really, for keeping that idea in front of us that we're doing what we're doing today. So, Mary, our thanks go to you for this. And last but certainly not least is our own beloved Patricia Pearce. As you know, she is becoming a world-class interviewer and has done most of the interviews for a lot of our programs. She's also a mystic, a former pastor, and an author. The story of her journey is called Beyond Jesus, and it's her odyssey of coming from a church pastor into this whole new spiritual realm to which she's been called, and many of us are called. She also has an outstanding podcast I highly recommend, so you can learn more about Patricia at patriciapearce.com. Plus, she's sort of serving as a moderator today. The four of our panelists will be all sharing, but in case there's any problems or confusion or fist fights break out, while Patricia will step in and moderate and keep us all in line. So it is such a joy to be at this day and have this program to which we've been looking forward to. Last thing before I sign off and turn it over to Patricia is to remind you that after our panelists has been together for a while, we will have a Q&A session. Our programs are scheduled so that after our panelists and our guests have time to share their life, their journey, their work, we then will invite you to come on board and ask a question or offer a thought or reflection. So to do that, remember, it's important as you go through our time together with a panelist, if you have a question or thought, jot it down so that you don't forget it when we come to the Q&A session. And when we do, then you can click a button to raise your hand, and we'll call on as many people as we have time to do. As I said, we have a large, wonderful group today from all around the world, so it's going to be exciting. So without further ado, Patricia, it's our pleasure to turn it over to you, and we will let the Spirit take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. And it is just such a delight to be with all of you. I'm going to just... I need to make a little, I'm seeing, there we go. Just a little tech adjustment there. So it's so wonderful. I've been so looking forward to this day, and just to see where we are led with our conversation. And to start us off, we're each going to share a little brief reading from one of our writings. And I think to do that, we're just going to go in order that I see you all on my screen. Mary, would you lead us off, Mary Reed?
Sure. First of all, I'm so happy to be here. We've been looking forward to this for so long. And I know Joe gave me credit for wanting to do a panel, but honestly, I just wanted to hang out with some like-minded people. So this is really quite selfish of me. I'm really glad we can do this. I'm going to read something from my new book, Divine New Being. And I wanted to read this part because I think it's apropos of, first of all, a lot of questions that I get when people are trying to sort of get there in their spiritual connection, as a mystic in particular. But I think that a large part of what we all do as mystics, the four of us, is really just allow an alignment. And then this stuff, comes through us. And so last year, for about 20 years, my experiences have been embodied metaphysical experiences. But last year, just after the pandemic began, I started channeling just suddenly. And I channel a very large collective of divine beings. And they are here because there is now an allowance of more divine presence to be here. And they say, we are only here for what is happening in the moment. And what's called for in the moment is this unitive consciousness, right? So the very first day that they showed up and I began to channel, I was working with my friend Corinne in a mutual meditation. And they gave us a chance to ask questions. Corinne's question, I think, is really apropos of most people at this time, having to do with just what we're supposed to be doing as a spiritual people. So Corinne asked the question, this group is called Consensus, by the way, that I channel. So she asked the question of consensus. I'm curious about my role in this. Is it simply to be the witness and to help create the energetic field? Is it simply to, and then Consensus interrupts and says, sorry, why do you say simply? Why do you say simply? This is the most magnificent teaching of all, to become the divine witness, to hold the most divine sacred space. Why would you say simply? Do you see how you minimize the role of being divine? This is a great disservice to your own divinity. Yes, your role is to hold space, not just for us, not just for Mary, not just for others, but for you. What happens when you become the divine witness? You align with your own divinity. You are in that perfected state of allowance, of presence. Now, does something come through you in those times where you have an additional contribution to the moment? Perhaps. In fact, yes, it will happen often. But remember, we are here for what is happening in the moment, and what is called for in the moment is divine presence. When you encounter divine beings or divine wisdom, what you have come into is the presence of that wisdom. Did that wisdom do something? No, it was simply there. It was held in presence so that you could see it, you could feel it, you could understand it, you could be with it, you could embody it. Do you see how the role is? Do you see how important it is? Do you see how perfect it is? The only thing that wants to be the star, that wants to do something, is the mind. It thinks it is more worthy if it does something. What we have asked for, what we need, what we are calling for is the being of the presence. The presence will play out in multiple ways, and it will happen in the way that it needs to happen each time. Do you see why we need you all to be part of the process here?
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mari, what reading would you like to share with us?
Well, after that, I hate to admit that I picked my reading because of sound. I don't know how to explain sound, but all of you know it. You know, I'm sure poetry and everything. Anyway, so I'm just going to share one little paragraph from Course of Love, and then one from the new book that will be coming out soon, the second book of the Way of Mary, is called Memoria. Okay. A door has been reached, a threshold crossed. What your mind still would deny, your heart cannot. A tiny glimmering of memory has returned to you. It will keep calling you to acknowledge it and let it grow. It will tug at your heart in the most gentle of ways. Its whisper will be heard within your thoughts. Its melody will play within your mind. Come back, it will say to you. Come home, it will sing. You will know there is a place within yourself, where you are missed and longed for and safe and loved. The second is Holy Mary's words. We've crossed the threshold now and are taking a walk into the new, leisurely, drinking in all the sights and feeling the earth beneath our feet. Our breath comes easily, serenely. Now, for a time, you breathe the sacred in and out as naturally as you do in sleeping. You evoke time's memory and feel the power of time's remembrance. It is present and palpable within, alive and calling you to what is before you. Divine memory is of a time you but think you know not.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. Chelan, what would you like to share with us?
Thanks, Patricia. I just first want to just say hello to everyone and also just give so much honor to these other three just extraordinarily cool ladies. And I also just want to mention how amazing it is when you meet another with an open heart. It's this immediate feeling of home and kinship and just celebration and recognition of what's in there. Because the same mysterious, wonderful, alive, nourishing beauty lives inside of all of us. And when we open to it, we recognize it. And I recognize it in these three. And it's such an honor to be here with you all. So I'm going to read two poems, if I may. The first is from my first book of poetry, Susceptible to Light, which I published less than a year ago. And I also just want to say that a year ago, I could not have imagined being a panelist here today. It would have been beyond my wildest dreams. It would have been too much for my nervous system. It would have been just, anyway, it would have been unfathomable. So I just want to say that as a token to the potential for human transformation and profound expansion when we decide to kind of come out with our truth and that which, is our true gift and our true love in our hearts. So here we go. This poem is called The Worst Thing. The worst thing we ever did was put God in the sky out of reach, pulling the divinity from the leaf, sifting out the holy from our bones, insisting God isn't bursting dazzlement through everything we've made a hard commitment to see as ordinary. Stripping the sacred from everywhere to put in a cloud man elsewhere, prying closeness from your heart. The worst thing we ever did was take the dance and the song out of prayer, made it sit up straight and cross its legs, removed it of rejoicing, wiped clean its hip sway, its questions, its ecstatic yowl, its tears. The worst thing we ever did is pretend God isn't the easiest thing in this universe, available to every soul in every breath. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much. We have time for one more, Patricia, or should I hold it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, okay, fantastic. If I can find it. Okay. This is from my second book, Let Us Dance the Stumble and Whirl with the Beloved, that all of this came through in 7 months. So this one's called Things Are About to Get Interesting and kind of chronicles this process of cracking open and transforming and just how wild it is. So things are about to get interesting. The more you open to the light of the wild sun, the more motivated she'll be to pour her golden drink upon you. You thought your life was crazy now? Just wait until you let love in. You think she'll bring a sip of holy wine to your lips, but she'll pop the cork right off of this world and intoxicate all existence. Surround yourself with people who have already been brave enough to yank their souls from the straitjackets of their buds and let the blossom of their freak flags fly. You will need this encouragement because things are about to get interesting. What used to be your reverent postures will madly start trying to pull God into your body. All your grounded words will turn into the swooping birds of unpredictable poetry, and all of your polite ways will become true maniacs for love. Are you sure you're ready to turn your respectable life into a wild parade? Perhaps consider this before you pray like that again.
It's just so delicious.
Thanks so much.
It is so great. Thank you, Chelan. I'm going to read a little bit of a short passage from my book, Beyond Jesus, My Spiritual Odyssey. And this title actually was downloaded. I was told I was going to be writing a book that would talk about how ego consciousness shaped Christian belief. And it is told in the form of memoir. And I think one of our purposes today is sort of to demystify mysticism. And also, I just want to convey that it's not always a walk in the park. That, I think people think, oh, it's just, you're dancing through the daffodils, and that's not always the case. So this passage comes from me recounting a time when I was on spiritual retreat in New Mexico. And I had gotten this instruction while I was walking the labyrinth there that I needed to let go of my work. And this instruction was devastating because it felt like I was being asked to let go of my purpose. And this whole path for me has been one of yielding and allowing and yielding and allowing. And so in response to that instruction, I did a ritual of, where I burned symbols that for me conveyed what I believed my work was, my purpose. And then I'm going to pick it up in the aftermath of that ritual and what that was like for me. That evening I tried to pray, but couldn't. There was a cavernous emptiness inside me where once I had held a passionate purpose. I felt despondent and I went to bed early. At 3:30 I woke, still feeling a terrible void within, feeling there was no reason now for me to be here or anywhere. I felt drawn to go for a walk, so I dressed and set out. The desert was silent. It was a cold, clear, moonless night. Overhead, the Milky Way spanned the sky, softly illuminating the distant mesas. I didn't turn on my flashlight. I walked in darkness, navigating by the light of the stars. Eventually, I ended up at the labyrinth again, though there was no reason for me to be there. I had no question to pose and nothing left to offer. It lay in stillness before me, its twisting path barely visible in the starlight. I began to walk it. When I reached the center, I bowed, as I always did, to the mesa rising up before me, a shadowy silhouette in the darkness. Just then, a brilliant light peeked from the upper ridge of the mesa, piercing my eyes. Venus had risen, the morning star, harbinger of a new day. The light was so brilliant it blinded my night vision, and as I walked back out, I had to shade my eyes to make out the labyrinth's outline. Along the way, I stopped once to look up at the blazing planet again. Just then, a shooting star streaked across the sky. The rest of my retreat was filled with a sense of buoyancy and joy, as though a weight had been lifted from me. I understood now that the message I had received wasn't meant as a literal instruction, that it was time for me to resign my position. Rather, I was being asked to release all of my attachments. Any work that would come forth in the future wasn't to be mine. In the final days of my retreat, 2 words began to spontaneously appear in my mind, much as the words story and transform had appeared during the summer. But this time the words were follow and unstoppable. So,
First of all, let me just say those are 2 wonderful words.
Follow
and unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'd like us to, we're just going to let this be conversational for the most part, but I would like us to, first of all, reflect together on, for each of us, what does mysticism mean? What does mysticism mean? Anybody jump in as you feel moved?
Well, it's one of the reasons I chose to talk about memory, because how do you describe something like mysticism? You know, it doesn't always have words. It doesn't always have texture, but in that way, it felt to me like memory was a word that would kind of describe what it's like you, and memory comes, you know, at different times for different reasons, things you never thought you'd be thinking of, you know, something from your childhood or whatever, just comes when it comes and you have no control. And it has a scene attached to it, you know, it's, and that personal nature of it, it's not separate from you. So like I said, that's why actually I chose to speak of memory, because of that. That helped me a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. And it's like remembering something, like some essence of ourselves that we forgotten. Mary, were you going to say something?
I wasn't. You just touched on it just then. I started to actually read a different teaching from Consensus, and it had to do with this very thing, which was on that wisdom. We aren't really learning wisdom. We're remembering wisdom. We're remembering that thing that's already within us. We're just touching that place. So I think that because I grew up agnostic and was deeply agnostic until things started happening a little over 20 years ago. I didn't know what a mystic was. I didn't care what a mystic was. I didn't have any association with it at all. And it took me 10 years and a lot of really deep confusion to understand that what was happening to me was a mystical journey, was like a journey into that remembering. And so I came into the definition of mysticism just because of experience. And someone said, you realize that this is what a mystic is. Like everything that's happening to you is exactly what, happens with mystic wisdom. And so for me, just experientially, a mystic is one that has a direct relationship with divine wisdom or divine understanding. But I think in my experiences, in my travels or whatever, most people think about mysticism as one who seeks that wisdom or seeks that understanding. And which is understandable. But for me personally, from the embodied perspective, it is that lived experience of that wisdom.
Thank you. Chelan,
yeah, I didn't seek it either, so I understand that. I'm sorry, just commenting there. It comes, you don't have any choice or something.
Yeah. Chelan.
Thanks so much, you all. Well, so I read this wonderful quote the other day that I loved that said, this isn't verbatim, but it was something like, one doesn't arrive on the spiritual path through virtue. It's usually through suffering. And for me, that's absolutely true with the mystical path. And for me, I would define suffering as resisting what is and really working hard against what is. And the path of a facade, which is just the path of pretending and shoulding and wanting to be, a role that is appealing and all of these things that are just miserable. And then for me, the path, the mystic path, which I would definitely call it a path or a journey rather than an identity, but has come from this process of just really no longer being able to effort so much and live this life of willpower struggle, and just needing to crack open to the living, beautiful, brutal, transformational, alchemical inner energies of just what is, and letting the truth of that open and open and allowing and accepting and embracing those all of those energies, and allowing them to flow and to speak and to heal and to create. And so for me, and it's interesting because I think when we hear the word mystical, we can think of it as transcendent and kind of disconnected from the body in some way. And for me, it's just been, it's very much as a total intersection of the mystical and the emotional and the profoundly human and humbling. And so that's been my ride.
Yeah. Oh, I so appreciate you mentioning that, Chelan, because for me also, like the mystical, I guess I would say the mystical capacities in me, I think we all have them. They just sometimes are dormant for us.
Yes.
But for me, it really became awakened in the throes of grief. And, so there is that way in which we sometimes are cracked open, and it's not anything that we could have ever orchestrated, Yeah. So, and you're also, your point, actually, Chelan, you and Mary both mentioned this, the embodied nature of it. And that's, I think, we've got this idea of spirit and body being these, it's like separate domains. And
yes,
it is so embodied. I mean, in this very potent awakening experience that I had, it was not just my mind, but my heart was just blown open. Like, it was the awakening of the heart. And now, like, the heart is the portal, and I feel it physically. Like, I feel this heart glow. The heart is a sun inside of my chest. So it's very, very embodied. It's very tangible.
Yes.
You can riff on that. Anybody, like, jump in.
I agree 100%. And to me, it's sort of the realization of the sacredness of absolutely everything. And that is in the unitive consciousness state, right? In separation consciousness, we feel separate from whatever that wisdom is or whatever. But in the unitive consciousness state, realizing that we are it, we're not moving towards something, we're moving within something, right? It's all in this embodied realization of that connection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me,
I love how
kind
we're
of
talking, everybody's shaking
sorry.
their head. No, I'm just enjoying everybody nodding in agreement.
bobbing heads.
Everybody keeps doing that with it. Sorry, Mari, go ahead.
It's okay. I think, my major work, A Course of Love, came 20 years ago. And it was a very different time. And it came as a follow-on to A Course in Miracles, which many people did not like. They did not appreciate that. And so it was a very, and the idea of channeling, was you got out of the way. And so I've always kind of had this, somewhat for myself, I felt that way too, that I had to get out of the way, but it changed, and I felt like I wasn't really, my change wasn't accepted. The change that I felt in me, I couldn't express, and I couldn't somehow bring out. And so when I began to be able to do that, or just to not be able to stop myself from doing that, my life really changed. I mean, it was, I think some spiritual communities can be confining, and you have to make your way. You have to find your way and for me, it was as a woman, for sure. It was having to make my way as a woman, kind of in a man's world, So there are big big hurdles. For some of us anyway. I don't know. Maybe the younger people aren't going to have that. That would be so wonderful. No, I'm yeah, okay.
Chelan, I think that's good.
Oh, gosh. Well, I wanted to share that, so to open the heart, I think a lot of us intuitively know that there's something so unfathomably precious inside of our hearts. And just this our hearts are a treasure chest of divine wisdom. Yeah. And so we keep that magic closed because most of us have experienced social environments where what's true and so beautiful and potent and healing in our hearts isn't properly witnessed and valued and appreciated and honored. Mm-hmm. And so I feel that, I do believe everyone is a mystic. Everyone has a heart. Everyone has this profound trove of wisdom in the heart. And it's like this hidden gem, this hidden secret that when it emerges will completely transform the whole universe. Yeah. And then, so there's a wisdom, I think, of the timing of keeping it closed in a way. And we keep it closed because when we open it, we do have to encounter this profound risk of, maybe rejection or disapproval of the, society that's built on, that isn't built on the magic and truth and wisdom that's in our hearts. And so it can be painful to open our hearts and to take that risk. And so I want to honor people who aren't yet ready to go there because it's probably safe and wise on a level. And I also want to acknowledge that no matter how long we wait to really crack this treasure trove open, it's always there and it's always ready and it's always living within everyone. And I don't know where I was going with that, but that felt important to say.
I think you can feel it in people too, can't you? Even when they can't let it out yet, you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to say that I'm rereading right now Mary Reed's book, Unwitting Mystic, and there was a part in that book, Mary, where this whole thing, and it so resonated with me, where you receive, you like get this knowing about the role of the heart and the role of the mind, and that the mind, I'm going to paraphrase now and put it in my own experience because I won't say it correctly the way you wrote it, but it's like we live in a culture that so values the intellect and so values the thinking mind, and we'll never get there with the thinking mind. So, and whereas the there anyway, it's in here. So Mary, what are your take on the heart? Let's just go with that.
Yeah, exact same thing. And the passage that you're referring to there was a questioning. So I lived for several years I went from a healthcare executive in Washington, D.C., trying to figure out what is all of this, what's happening with all of this stuff, to eventually all of that normal world falling apart, and then this mystic journey unfolding. And when that happened, I ended up living in a tiny little nunnery in the Himalayas, and for about 7 years. And so during that time, I would do a lot of retreats. And in one of those retreats, I was asking the question, I didn't understand, like, what does it mean to be the light of God? What does that mean? Is that an actual light? Is it like just using language? What does that mean? And so in this retreat and doing this meditation with that question, up came two screens. And one was the light of God from the perspective of the mind. And the other was the light of God from the perspective of the heart. And they were very, very different screens. On the one with the mind was very rudimentary. It was like stick figures. It was very basic. And the one from the heart was just vibrant and alive and colorful and frenetic almost. It was just lively. And what was happening within me in learning about this was just that, the mind is the thing that's always trying to figure it out. It's trying to recreate what it's trying to understand, but it can't. Its function is to understand and to analyze the facts and all that stuff. But it's not the facts. right? It's not the reality. And so being in that truth of presence, right? In the embodied presence there. So, everything that we're saying, I just can relate 100% to every single thing that everyone is saying, but certainly that again and again and again over the years within my own experiences, just through the heart, through the heart, through the heart, through the heart, like it always shows up as you called it earlier, the portal, like it's just the home base, basically. It's always been my experience. It still is. Every single time I go into that heart, I sink right into it. There it is. Yeah.
And it's the quick connect with other people, just, heart to heart.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Chelan, talking about relating to, other people. I think that we realize very easily when truth recognizes truth. And that's like a heart resonance completely, right? It's just so simple and it's so honest, right? When this does away with all of that facade, right? Just getting direct connection into the honest space within each other.
Yeah. Thank you. I would love to hear from each of you about the process, or how you actually experience this mystical knowing or connection. Chelan, can I call on you first, because I'm so curious. I mean, these poems, they just land in you. Tell us about your process and how this really opened up for you.
Thanks so much, Patricia. That's a fantastic question. I'm really excited to hear everyone's answers too. It's juicy. So this poetic process really opened up for me around age 20. And that was a time for me of just really incredibly acute and profound suffering and loneliness and just abject misery. And the source of that really was a profound desire, like a desperate need for authentic expression and authentic connection with my heart and the hearts of others. But I didn't really have the language to know that that's what I needed. But I felt like I was almost this, every second of my experience was this like desperate beseeching prayer for that, even though I didn't exactly know it. And poetry had been something that I discovered a few years before as something of a gift. And I was writing poetry often. But again, it was this experience of really efforting, and it would take me like 2 months to string a poem together. And I felt insecure about the product and insecure about sharing it. And I was very much looking outside for what it meant to be a good poet, reading other people's words and thinking, how do I do what they're doing? And then one day in the heart of this, extreme time of pain, I was kind of inspired to set up an experiment for myself in which I would allow myself to write a bad poem every day, a bad poem. I gave myself permission to let whatever wanted to flow. I just needed to get out of this, what I call the paralysis of perfectionism, which came from just fear. And just see if that would kind of shake things loose. So I did that. And can I read the poem that came through on that first day? It was profoundly, it was a different paradigm of experience with poetry, and it stayed with me ever since. It was a real cracking open from one place to another. So this is in some ways my favorite poem because it was the experience of this. It's called Say Wow. And it just came through as fast as I could write it, and almost no content editing. And it was the most profound experience of spiritual connection that I had ever had. And I completely trusted every word because it felt like this beautiful, sacred mix of something from the beyond kind of mixing with me and my experience and sharing itself in this way that was meant to be. So here it is. This poem is called Say Wow. Each day before our surroundings become flat with familiarity and the shapes of our lives click into place, dimensionless and average as Tetris cubes. Before hunger knocks from our bellies like a cantankerous old man, and the duties of the day stack up like dishes, and the architecture of our basic needs commissions all thought to construct the 4-door sedan of safety. Before gravity clings to our skin like a cumbersome parasite, and the colored dust of dreams sweeps itself obscure in the vacuum of reason. Each morning, before we wrestle the world and our hearts into the shape of our brains, look around and say, wow. Feed yourself fire. Scoop up the day entire like a planet-sized bouquet of marvel sent by the universe directly into your arms, and say, wow. Break yourself down into the basic components of primitive awe and let the crescendo of each moment carbonate every capillary, and say, wow. Yes, before our poems become calloused with revision, let them shriek off the page of spontaneity. And before our metaphors get too regular, let the sun stay, a conflagration of homing pigeons that fights through fire each day to find us.
Wow.
Thanks.
What more is there to say than wow?
Thank you. Yeah, it was quite a moment for me. I was in the computer lab at my college and was just like, holy shit, what was that? And yeah, and then so since then, it's just a process of really trying to keep my heart open and trying, and that opens the way for my spirit to shine through. And when I'm truthful about what's there, whatever is there, even if it's, painful and hard, becomes an entryway, not an obstacle for the magic that's within all of us to flow.
And you were surprised.
I was really surprised when the poems started coming through.
Yeah,
I was shocked.
Yeah, I don't know what the word is for that. It's like a riot, like it just, yeah.
So Mari, how about for you? That you resonated with the surprise element.
Yeah. Well, I'm just coming into some lightness of being, actually. I've been a very serious person, and I started out wanting to be a writer. I didn't have, that was my goal. That was what I wanted to do with my life. It was everything to me. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write books, wanted to write mysteries. That's how I started out, with wanting to write mysteries. But I was also very religious, and I loved church. I loved Jesus. I loved the scripture. And so when I began to hear, my first time I began to hear was from an angel, and I was I didn't know who I could tell. If I hadn't had a couple of girlfriends, and then when it was Jesus, it was like, oh my God, I can't talk to you. So I had a lot of this of shyness and nervousness about what I was doing. And it felt so profound and serious. And it was my sacred charge from the beginning. It was like nobody could have stopped me from bringing this book together. It was like, and it took 3 years, and I was called to leave my job for it. So I became very poor, and, so I didn't have a whole lot of joy, but I had this deep, profound love and connection and hope, kind of. It was like I knew, I was absolutely certain something was going to spring of this work. And so over time, and I didn't even know what, I wasn't directing it, and I knew I wasn't going to direct it, but I grew to honor it. And have sort of a deep feeling of wanting it to stay true to what it was, not wanting people to bend it into a carbon copy of A Course in Miracles, or not wanting people to bring it to their heads. And it's a hard, it was kind of a hard thing to try to get across for many years. And so now I'm with Mary, and I'm feeling a real sense of liberation, and I'm coming, it sounds crazy 20 years, so much more later, but I'm coming into something new, and it has a lot more me in it. and a lot more passion, and a lot more allowance of things like grief and suffering, and to be an emotional, very deeply feeling person, and to have that side of life sort of roped off in a spiritual community, that you don't feel anything that isn't good. You don't have grief. You don't make anything special. I don't know. There just seem like there are all kinds of rules, and I didn't mind breaking them. I didn't mind that, but it was hard, It's like, because I'm not a very bold person, but I'm getting there. I'm getting bolder and more courageous. And I absolutely love receiving from Mary, who is both gentle and fierce. She can be so, I don't know, it's, and we're having a dialogue, and that's nice. It's not the kind of receiving where people can just isolate it. It's all Jesus, it's like this kind of receiving. It's obvious, which is really kind of not obvious in many of the channeled writings, but it's still happening. You don't get any of these writings without it being connected here. That's all there is to it. You don't. So
I want to come back to something you mentioned, Mari.
Yeah.
First, I would love to hear from Mary about your process. All of your visions, it's just spontaneous. So it happens spontaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, talk to us about your process, or how you experience this mystical connection.
You're asking me?
Yep.
Okay, just want to make sure. Yeah. So yes, I didn't start with any process. It came calling to me. So I'll just explain the easiest way for people to understand what happens to me metaphysically, with not the channeling, that's something different, but the mystical experiences. The way that I explain it is, you can imagine that there's a blackboard that has a lesson written on it, like an ancient lesson or a spiritual truth or something. But instead of looking at the blackboard to understand it, I enter into the blackboard and become the lesson itself. So there's a full embodiment of that wisdom, the full experience of the wisdom. And these have happened I'm just walking down the street, or I'm just coming into or out of sleep, or just random moments. Or hypnosis was actually the thing that opened the door for me originally. I had been hearing a voice, and I went to get some help with what is this voice that's happening. And in that hypnosis session, I went right into the body and being of Jesus on the cross at the moment of crucifixion, and then had a 3.5 hour scene of understanding humanity from that vantage point. And that's what opened the spiritual gates. Then after that, I just began to have things happen spontaneously. So that's what's been happening for 20 years. And when I moved to India and really just stopped sort of all of the noise of the world and could settle in and just allow things to come, then it just started happening very, very often. And all the pieces started to fit together. All of these various disparate things that had been happening were starting to sort of put a whole picture together. And now I can have them pretty easily just going into a meditative state. So they're pretty regular with me. And then the channeling, when the channeling started, it happened, I usually have to have a witness of some kind of listening a listener. And so I channel every week with my private Patreon community. So I just sit down and then I invite in Consensus, and they will do some kind of teaching in a meditative state. But almost everything is happening now in a meditative state with me. So that's my process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. For me, as you all know, it's been dreams have played a pivotal role in the ways that I've received information. And also when I'm meditating, I don't get verbal things. Like it seems like, some of you get verbal things. Sometimes I get verbal things, but more it's just like this impression, or it's just like this knowing. It's not verbal. It's just like I don't even know what to call it, but it's just like, oh, like it's just like a direct, like mind meld kind of thing. I don't even know exactly how to describe it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's just, it is sort of like an aha, I guess. Yeah. Okay, coming out. Coming out as a mystic. Coming out with the mystical experience. Anybody want to jump in?
I kind of did mine early, so you guys go ahead.
I'll share.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
So my coming out as a mystic experience happened quite recently, really, in a bigger way. This last year, which is it's been the most transformational year of my life, hands down. So, and so I just want to tell a little bit about that story. So last year, right around this time, I bought a book of Hafez poetry, this incredible mystical poet who's my favorite poet, just to get some ideas about formatting for a book, because I remember those books had pretty formatting. And I just got this powerful inspiration to do what I was going to call nightly prayer experiments with Hafez, and just see if I could tap Hafez for more inspiration. So I started going on nightly night walks and just asking Hafez for help. And then just this torrential flow of inspiration like never before opened up. So then I started asking Hafez for help with promotion of the book. And then 3 weeks into that, I got an email from Daniel Ladinsky, who's the renderer of all of his poetry and has made him a superstar to the Western world. Reached out to me and asked me to collaborate with him. And so that was it was insane. And also one of my prayers, I was just like going on this wild prayer experiment. And I the biggest, most, absurd prayers. And one of them was, this sounds arrogant, but I'm going to share it anyway. It's also a little embarrassing, but I wanted to be acknowledged as like the female Hafez. And then one thing that Daniel Ladinsky has done is he's put me in his will, and he's willing me 1,000 of his unfinished Hafez poems for me to. Oh my God. So surreal.
What a year.
What a crazy year. So my experience of coming out was very much like held in the arms of these incredible cosmic doors opening and being like, whoa, prayer, I guess, works. And that's amazing. And holy cow. And I'm just so glad, though, to have really felt this support from others. And I had this I called them my A-team of my spirit friends, who I would ask to find delegates that would help me open all kinds of doors. Anyway, and it's just a total experiment. And I say that because that was this amazing container. And I'm so glad to have had this incredible, amazing, supportive container, because gosh, it is scary coming out in this way. And I had so many assumptions to burn through. I was afraid people would think I was stupid, crazy, immature, childish for, putting myself out there as a mystical poet. I thought I might be laughed at and ridiculed and all of this stuff. I thought that people in kind of more religious communities would think my work heretical and disrespectful. And I thought people in non-spiritual communities would be uncomfortable with my use of the word God. So basically, I was just afraid I would be rejected across the board and humiliated, and that my dream would wither and die. So it takes a lot of, for me, it just took a lot of continual showing up to this, to this flame, little flame inside of myself, and continuing to feed that, and then continuing to test that, and then continuing to get beautiful, for the most part, just incredible and beautiful responses. And then, and a couple hard ones, but for the most part, just beautiful. And then just growing in resilience, and growing in trust of listening to my intuition and my heart. And just kind of one step forward at a time, trying to put my truth and my desires, my joyful, loving desires forward to the world. And then going a little further and a little further. And then it just became kind of this exponential process. And really, it's the work of being seen in our truth, I think, is what it means to come out as a mystic. The work of our truest, most kind of socially unconventional and beautiful parts of ourselves coming forward.
Oh, I love the work of being seen. Love that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for asking. It's really helpful to.
It's so great to hear your story, Chelan. Wow.
You.
Yeah, Mary, coming out as a mystic.
Yeah, I haven't thought about these things for so long. It's really interesting because all the journey, but it took me 10 years to come out to myself, like to really that ultimate level of self-acceptance, like this is my truth, right? It's not just because for so long I sort of compartmentalized it and held it very privately, because when you're dealing with going into the mind of Buddha or the body of Jesus or whatever, it's not something that you can go to work and just talk about, so, hey, guess what happened to me over the weekend? I mean, so I didn't know how to hold it. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know what to do with it. But so it was a lot for me to just privately process. And it wasn't until all of my normal world completely crashed and there was a lot of personal devastation that I finally just stopped trying to fight it. And I didn't, we talk a lot in our world about surrender, the role of surrender, the value of surrender, the importance of surrender. But I didn't get there gracefully. I didn't elegantly step into a state of surrender. I got there because I was defeated. And in that state of defeat was finally when I just stopped trying to figure everything out or fix anything or make a plan. And then the mystical journey just began to unfold. And as that began to unfold and the doors were easy, everything began that no effort journey, made it then it made it effortless for me to finally just accept what was happening, because that was the way all the resources were starting to come to me again and again. And it was in that self-acceptance state that I began to embrace the word mystic. It was finally what I learned what a mystic was. And then when I was invited to go to India to talk about my experiences and ultimately live there, I had to come out to my family and to my friends who I'd never told any of these for 10 years. I've been having all these experiences, never told a soul. Well, not many people anyway. So I had to step into that little by little. And then when I got to India, I started to blog just to talk about my experiences, because as all of you know, it's a lot to hold. There's a lot inside, and there needs to be some sort of cathartic process to be able to get it out. And so I just started that blog as a way to begin to speak, begin to have it come outside of me and share it with people. And through that process, and then speaking to the nuns at the nunnery where I was living, I just began to come out more and more and more. And then when I wrote my book was when I finally came out really publicly in 2014. And that was the first time that it was stepping out to the stage and saying, all right, as weird as it sounds, here's my truth. The truth is I am a mystic, and these are the things that have been happening. So it was getting the book out was a really powerful claiming of there's no going back. This is the path now that I'm on. So, and I've never wanted to look back. I don't think I could if I wanted to. It is as it is.
Yeah. Well, I can so resonate with what you're describing, Mary, because for me, I was closeted for many, many years, except with some close friends. I was happy to share sort of like the results of the experiences, the understanding that the experiences bestowed, but not the experiences themselves. That I kept very close. And yet I knew my story, it was a story that wanted to be told. And so here's the extent that I went to not to come out. I wrote a whole novel, and I couched my story in one of the characters in the novel so that I could share the story, but not claim it as my own. Mm-hmm. And there was a writing teacher that knew of my experience. And she said, Patricia, your story has power because it happened to you. Yeah. You need to tell it as your story. And I was like, oh, shit.
I agree there.
Yeah. And then
I have a question. I have a question on that note. So Mari and Patricia, you both come from a very sort of Christian background, right?
Yeah.
And I come from an agnostic background, and Chelan comes from Baha'i, which is sort of a more inclusive. Is that a correct way to say that? So I'm curious to know if it was different coming through from sort of a Christian background, if coming out as a mystic held some kind of different prejudice or taboo or something like that because it's in Christianity, versus agnostic, there's no judgment there. And Baha'i, I think that you kind of have mysticism is sort of built into the Baha'i faith. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So was it different for you guys, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, but it's mainly for me, and it sounds, I think, Patricia, we're kind of alike, and it's a shyness, like we didn't know, or anyway, I didn't know how to tell people, and especially family, and I hadn't had I was the single mother of 3 kids when I was 23 years old. I was a wild young woman, and here all of a sudden I'm talking to Jesus. It didn't seem to add up, and so, I really kept it to myself, but I think a lot of my journey was mediated by wanting to be a writer, because that's what I dream of, is being alone and writing. I love being alone. I love writing. And I was really thrilled when Holy Mary spoke about sacred privacy and sacred union, the two together. So maybe you had that in a certain way, Mary. You had it in a more, but I just built my sacred privacy as much as I could, and it all becomes cute later, at the time it's stressful, but like, when this version of A Course of Love came out, it finally made it onto my mom's coffee table because she loved the look of it, and so, but it was all kind of okay with me. I mean, I have had no yen to be a public person. I like, like when the 4 of us got together earlier, I just loved that. I love I love friendship. I love getting to know people deeply. Those are the joys of life for me. And I think that's something that is somewhat lacking sometimes when people are in community and don't make those private connections. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen a lot of loneliness in big communities. And anyway, so I loved when Jesus started talking about dialogues back in 2000. I was like, and I had a dream then, it was what was this going to be like? And I dreamt of a conversational salon. So it's like a looseness. It's like taking all of the spiritual hierarchy and the form, like, I believe it's meant to be like just bursting the form and having it happen more naturally, as in dialogue and friendships. Because I think that is where my most profound experiences have happened, is in friendship and close relationship. And I know an awful lot of people who don't have that grace. You know, they've been living very communal kind of lives. And so, I mean, I'm not sorry about anything that's happened. You know, it's been hard sometimes, but I think I became very accepting of my own way and who I am through all of it, you know, in a way I might not have otherwise. So.
Yeah, and
Patricia, you're just accepting too. I just love the story from last time where I asked you to be my writer friend because I loved her writing, and she said, "I'm not a writer." And then she discovered that she is.
I've never aspired to be a writer, but it's dawned on me that actually I am a writer. Anyway, yeah. So Mary, back to your question about that. It's interesting because for me, having come out of the Christian background, there's a way in which it's sort of funny because mysticism is acknowledged as something in the past more than something in the present.
Yes.
Like, biblical figures had mystical experiences, and it's like the canon is closed.
Yes.
The book is closed, and now, like, they're the only ones who have legitimate mystical experiences. So there's a way in which it feels almost, I mean, and this is just me, right? But it felt almost heretical to be, sharing that I'm having these experiences. And I'm having dreams where Jesus is showing up, like when doing trespasso meditation with me. Like, so there's a way in which, the doctrinal system becomes the mediator that I think becomes an obstacle to the direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have one in spite of them.
Yeah. I have one more. I want to make sure that we have time for our audience to ask questions, but just really quickly, integration. How do you all go about integrating the mystical experience with what it is to be living like the everyday life in your relationships and your everyday responsibilities? And what is that like for you? You'd like to jump in?
I mean, I think that we sort of touched on this earlier about just realizing that everything is part of the sacredness, right? So that everything that you're doing is integrating. Like everything is a process of integration, and so whether it's deciding, I'm doing this from Turkey right now. I'm call from Turkey, and I needed to just have some time to, I just love the world. I love the world. I love all of the new things, all of the exciting things, all of the adventurous things, just new people, new foods, new sights, new things. And I needed that sort of replenishment. And to me, this is part of the integration process, right? I'm just opening up to new things. I have more spaciousness, and I'll incorporate all of that. And then I'll go back to the known things, to the familiar things, to the daily routines. And all of that is being, processed with the integration. So in my world, I think the word integration is just a helpful reminder that we're constantly sort of evolving, right? We're bringing in new, we're expanding, we're opening up, we're allowing more in. And this is just the constant state, right? I think it just helps us to be patient when we remember that this is all integrating. We're always going to be integrating, always integrating, but recognizing that we are integrating the new, right? And as we integrate the new, we're transforming the old in the process. So for me, it's just a normal part of life. It is normal life. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mary.
True.
I'll share.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had, around the same time that poetry kind of cracked open for me in this way, I also, like Mary, through the amazing tool of hypnotherapy, had this experience of really experiencing this true self that has always inherently been healthy and happy and whole and worthy of love and acceptance. And while I had this profound experience of self, which really kind of replanted my identity from a very like scarce and fearful place to one that was more deeply rooted and just, you know, this true self. It didn't make all the other challenges go away, but what it did was it allowed me to be able to process through them and integrate them, because I didn't believe them as true anymore. And I wasn't, when we identify with our struggles and our stresses, that's when they get locked down and when it's hard actually to relate to them in a loving way. And so now, so I have two little kids. I have a 4.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I'm married, and all I want to do is run away and write poetry. But here I am, you know, in this also like demanding, you know, I have this domestic part of my life that I value it, and I care about it so much, and it brings up, it's constantly parenting, for me, brings up my limitations and my challenges and just old trauma and, you know, anger. And so, but because I don't believe that's ultimately who I am, that instead I am a steward of these energies, and I've gotten tools to be able to steward these old energies through. That's how I view them, and that's how I work with them. So it's not bad. It's not contrary to the mystical path to have this stuff arise. It's part of it. And as I, you know, continue to integrate and alchemize, you could say, these energies through as they appear to me, as they do often, that's how I grow, and that's how I move forward, and that's how I access new understanding and empathy and wisdom, that then I kind of harness those energies to write from. And so it kind of evolves. I evolve as a person, and my writing evolves. So it's helpful to have these like really insistent mirrors around me all the time to continue these old energies, so that, you know, bit by bit we can become more, you know, accepting, loving, and truthful and integrated. So that's my take. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow.
Mari, anything you want to add?
Well, I got my biggest yen after receiving A Course of Love was to buy a little piece of land behind my yard and have a cabin out there, and I have it now. And that really, I'm probably, I go out there first thing every morning, and that's my real love. And I love my trees and my squirrels and chipmunks, and I feed things, and I feel so connected and feel the sentience of everything around me, as you were speaking of, Mary. And so I just think I'm kind of in a way, a classic writer. I want the writing life, and I have my cabin to do it in. And that takes me everywhere I always thought it would. The writing itself, and it's all very, I have a rich inner life, and I do have a hard time expressing it sometimes in an outward way, but I can share that in what I write, but it's just sort of me, you know. And so maybe more like a classic mystic, you know. That's what they used to do, was go off and be in a little hut or something, and but that's just kind of what I most wanted.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
How about you?
You know, for me, I guess I really resonate, Chelan, with what you're saying. I feel like, so I've got my morning routine, you know, where I I journal, I meditate. And then I feel like when I come out of my meditation room, that's where it really starts to happen. Like so how, you know, am I being present to the carrot that I'm chopping? And am I actually seeing the carrot? like seeing that in this carrot is everything. And I feel like more and more I'm entering into a state of gratitude for all of the irritations that come along, because they are invitations. You know, the irritations are invitations to let go and to allow and to accept. And so it feels like that's daily life is where the rubber hits the road for me. Yeah. So people who want to connect with each of us can go to our websites and see what we're up to right now. I know we're all doing some exciting things. So it's all of our names with the exception of Mary. Your website is unwittingmystic.com. But then we've also got mariperron.com, right? And Harkin.com, and Patricia Pearce, spelled with an EA, like peace, .com. So thank you all. This has been really such a joy to be with you all in conversation. And I'm going to ask Joe now to come back on to lead us in our Q&A time. And hopefully some of the listeners have had a chance to think about questions that they'd like to ask. So Joe.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chelan, Mary, Patricia, for this heavenly time. It's been so insightful, a real wow moments along the way, but it definitely brings so much into our experience that we wouldn't have had without this. So we're going to turn it over and open up for those who might like to ask a question. You need to raise your hand if you do, and we'll get to as many as we can. And then of course, you guys have done such a wonderful job of explaining and attacking this from every different angle. There were a number of questions that were typed in the Q&A, and I realized, well, they've already answered that. So you get an A+ for addressing this. But there are one or two, and we'll start. I noticed there is a question, but remember to raise your hand. There's a question from Gary, and we'll ask him if he might come on and let him ask a question, whether it's to an individual or to everyone. And so, Gary, if you're there, we would invite you to turn on your video and let us hear your question.
I want to point out there's a couple of Garys on here.
Well, so I'm clicking on him. There is Gary, and unmute. So thank you, Gary, for joining us. Be sure and unmute yourself, and then let us hear your question, and if it's addressed to anyone in particular.
Hello, thank you all. First of all, I just am very grateful for what you've presented and you're sharing with us. Patricia, this is Gary in Bob's group in Denver.
Good to see you, Gary.
Again. We have a group called Quantum Faith that Patricia has been kind enough to work with us a couple of times. So you've hit on so many points that resonate with me. I have studied sacred traditions and psychedelica, and I think of alternative states of consciousness when I hear you. And it just came to me that actually what you're talking about are not alternative states of consciousness, but the original state of consciousness. And, you know, every culture has had a way to try to achieve alternative states. You have found them. The Christian saints found them. The sacred traditions of Buddhism and Hinduism found them. And I just wonder, how is it, and you've touched on this, but, you know, how is it, and you know, I also think that perhaps NDEs is a really great way to get to these alternative states, to die before we die. And as someone said, it's not what kills you that makes you stronger, it's actually what kills you that makes you stronger. It's not what doesn't kill you, it's actually what kills you that makes you stronger. And it just strikes me that you've probably all gone into some aspect of a near-death experience and come back with that connection to the divine. And I would just ask you maybe to comment on that, if you would.
Oh. Well, I'll jump in just very briefly. I think there is a way in which for me at least, I'll speak for myself. There is a way in which there is a dying to an old self. There is a dying to an old way of understanding, or, I think of it as the assigned self, the assigned identity that we all arrive in this world with, and that is what then dies because it's not the authentic self. Chelan touched on this too, the true self. So that would be my response to Gary's question.
I can say that in my experiences throughout the years, many times, especially when I finally got the help that I needed to understand what was happening, the near-death experience qualities were very common in my experiences. Seeing the light, coming into union with wisdom, the ecstatic bliss state, those sorts of qualities of near-death experience were common to mine, and still are in some circumstances. But I want to just note something you said about that we've found these states. In my own experience, it doesn't feel like I've found anything as much as I've aligned with it, or allowed it. And to me, it's just sort of me getting out of the way so often in these states sort of coming through. Otherwise, I feel like I'm taking credit for something that I didn't really do. I just sort of allowed it to happen. But these, to me, there are very, it's sort of a natural state of expanded awareness. We're just coming into more of all that we already are. That's how it feels anyway.
Yeah, the death of anything for me is trying. As soon as I try, it's over.
Yeah.
From listening to you all, as well as others mystics we've known, it comes to me that there are different ways. Some people, this voice just comes to them almost unbidden, while others, there's a real passageway through. It reminds me of the writings of Dr. James Hollis, who in fact is going to be a guest of ours in the new year, I think, who's one of the most profound psychoanalysts of Jungian tradition, but from a very spiritual perspective. He wrote a book called Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life. And he goes through, and it was very helpful to me when I went through a difficult time about 10 years ago through a serious illness and so forth. And he quotes Dante saying, midway through life's journey, I found myself in a dark wood, having lost my way. But what he does that kind of relates to what we're talking about today is he talks about how we get to a point in life where our provisional self has sort of worn out. What we were taught to be and thought of ourselves as being is worn out. And it's just not cutting it anymore. And we're kind of wandering around like, what is going on? And this new self is not yet quite born. And so we're in this sort of desert sometime, going through the old self that doesn't work anymore, but having a little taste of this new self that is there until we finally get on the other side of it. So, it just reminded me of that for some of us, at least, that it doesn't just come to us unbidden, but it's definitely a journey that has some dark periods along the way. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because that was a profound kind of understanding in my own journey. Let me get back. I do notice a few more questions and hands are popping up. I see one from Clifford, and I want to see if he could join us. Let me see. Clifford, are you there? If so, I'm going to bring you on and ask you to turn on your video. There's Cliff. Yeah.
This is for Chelan. I don't know too much about Baha'i. I know more about Sufism and Hafez. Can you tell me what that spiritual background influences, not defines as though it was something that restricted, but influences your own spiritual experiences in your poetry and in your life. I love the fact of talking about your energies with a 1-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. My son has a 2.5-year-old, and he's right there with you. But how does those backgrounds influence your mysticism?
Oh, thanks so much for asking. I appreciate that. It's good for me to practice this because I grew up in a small town and everyone here was either Christian or didn't have a religious background. And so I felt super weird and super ashamed of being different and very much privatized my spiritual life because I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't know how to and I didn't want to be weird. So it's good now for me to be just sharing this with 100 people or however many we have here. So, I have so much to thank the Baha'i faith for, and the Baha'i community, which is one that just really celebrates the arts as a form of worship and is just a beautiful, for the most part, with its flaws, but beautiful community, really intending to, just one of the practices is just trying to see the beautiful and the light and the good in others, and to uphold that. And then also just my worldview from the Baha'i perspective, which is that all religions come from the same source, and that the heart of all religions, the purpose and the intent, is to help humanity grow and develop, both societally and spiritually. And so throughout humanity's history, the Baha'i writings say there's always been this spiritual guidance, which has been not confined either just to, the group that practices it, but really that with each of these great teachers comes a catalyzing energy to transform the consciousness of humankind. And the Baha'i writings say that today is the day of really where all of the promises of the past are really going to be fulfilled. And that's explained, which I love, and a lot of my poetry talks about this, is the need to really redefine all of these concepts of all the ways we've related to things of the past, the ways we've related to God, the ways we've related to religion, the ways we've related to everything. And to have the courage to investigate truth and reality for ourselves, and that we have the capacities in us to go on this voyage of being in an honest, open conversation with reality and with God. And so that's been huge, and just kind of, I think, just there's a lot of encouragement to access, human potential that comes in the Baha'i writings, and there's also a notion that people are good at heart, and that there's a lot of baggage that I think about Catholics need to kind of unload, and maybe I believe that it's probably just in some ways misinterpretation, but it really helps to feel like, if it's true that we're created noble in with all of these incredible divine gifts within us, that anything that's not resonating with that is something that we can move through and work through. So I think I also felt empowered on a level to be able to, I was well set up to be able to move through unhelpful conditioning, because on a deep level, I did believe that, I'm inherently worthy and noble. So I don't know if that answers your question, but thanks, Clifford. That was good experiment for me talking about.
Thank you, Chelan, and thank you, Cliff, for that question. We had another question from Suthama Kim. I'm going to ask that to turn on the video, and there you are, and you've unmuted. Wonderful. Is your question for one person in particular, or everyone?
Well, I think it might be for everyone.
Okay.
I was first of all, thank you very much. It's been lovely, and I was really curious and fascinated when you said that Jesus talked to you, or Hafez came through to you, and I just thought, it's so interesting. If I had that experience, I think I would be a little bit tentative. I think I had a conversation with what might have been Jesus or might have been someone from the past, but I get the sense that you really feel that it was Jesus. It was Hafez. And I just thought, how do you know? How could you say it in such a definite way? So I'm just curious. I'd love to know more about how you know it is a conversation with these spiritual figures of the past that no one in my lifetime has ever met. And it just, so there's something really fascinating about that.
Can I jump in here?
Jump in, Mary.
Over the years, I've had experiences with angels, with Buddha, with Jesus. In this group that I channel, Consensus, it's a composite of, literally thousands of light beings, in which there are archangels and other things. And it's really distinct who is who when something is coming forward. Archangel Michael has like a incredible presence that is very strong and large, and it has a feeling that's undeniable. This is Archangel Michael. And same thing with Jesus. So my two main teachers have always been from the very beginning, Jesus and then Buddha. And Buddha, for me, is very much associated with things in the mind, sort of dissolving the conditioning of the mind. And Jesus is always deeply associated with the compassion of the heart. And so they'll work differently together. They feel differently. They make their presence known. I literally see them as in their, I've seen them at different ages. I've seen them at different stages of life. So they come in lots of different ways. But in my experience, they're completely undeniable. That is who, I never have to say, I wonder who this is. That's like, it's just really, really clear. There's no mistaking it whatsoever. And I say that coming from an agnostic background. Like, the first time that Archangel Michael came in, I'm like, whoa, what is this? It was very, very distinct. So I'm sure that the others would probably attest to the same kind of thing. But just wanted to jump in there with that.
Thanks, Mary. Can I share next?
Yep.
I think that's such a great question. What's your name again? I don't see you on the screen. Susantha? Is that it? Susantha. Great. Thank you so much for that question. So I don't actually claim with ultimate, with any kind of full authority or anything that it absolutely was Hafez that came through. But I just really like to set this stuff up more in my mind as experimental. And I was just on a nightly experiment with just experimenting with chatting with my favorite dead poet, and asking for very specific things, and the results were undeniable. So I asked for inspiration, and I was like, my life became so inconvenienced by the constant torrential flood of poetic inspiration that was very much in the same style of Hafez poetry. So that was like, whoa, it was wild. And then 3 weeks into this practice, getting an email from, one of the most successful living poets who, like, I self-published my book. I didn't have any marketing support. I didn't have any big names associated with me. And one of the most successful living poets, Daniel Ladinsky, who's done all of the renderings of Hafez poetry, just discovered my book, asked me to collaborate with him, and has gotten me in touch with the major publishing houses of the world with soaring endorsements. I mean, it's just wild. After talking with Hafez, asking Hafez very directly for promotional help. The results are very interesting, but I do have I'm a Western-minded thinker, and that's just how so I do walk with some, skepticism, I suppose, but I find it, still just so exhilarating to do these experiments and see what happens. So that's where I'm at with that.
We had one other question that came in on the Q&A from Gary, and it's along the same line, just wondering if any of you in the beginnings or even now had a struggle with saying, is that my voice that I'm hearing just talking to me, or is it really this other being? Did any of you go through that? Because let me back up and interject there, because there's been times that I feel almost like you're saying, Chelan, where I would get wisdom that I was not sure of, but the results just blew me away. It's kind of like, well, if that's my voice, it's gotten pretty powerful of late, because it sounded like me, but I've never had that sort of results before. But again, just have any of the others of you struggle with the fact of wondering if it's your own voice you're hearing, or definitely wisdom coming through another?
I can say one thing very short, is that I always felt known.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's an unusual thing. I felt known to my bones, to my core.
Right.
That told me.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. That was a great question. I notice we have a little bit more time. We've got one from Carol. I'm going to invite Carol, if she would, to come on and turn on her video and unmute herself, and see if she has a question and who it may be for, and let us know. There you are, Carol.
Hi, everybody. It isn't a question, but I just wanted to say there were such moments of laughter. There were so many moments of tears. Watching the four of you, feeling the presence and this beautiful affirmation for one another of these unique voices, and everybody's different process, and this one thing happening, and it was very beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Really very sweet.
I want to add here. So I know Reverend Lawson, and she's actually from up in your area, Joe, up in Morristown, New Jersey.
Wonderful.
That's where we know each other from. But Carol has a long history with lots of different people, and was a minister in the Unity there for 30 plus years or something. So it's really nice to have people, really good experiences coming in and being parts of these communities, the mystic wisdom communities, and being witnessed by people like her. So very glad that you're here, Carol.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carol. We appreciate that. Well, let's see. We may have time for one more question. We had one from Janet. We'll see if Janet can come on and click her video and turn it on and let us know who your question is for. There you are. And a lot of people know Janet. She, in fact, is the president of our Center for Contemporary Mysticism. So we're so grateful for her work and her role in all that we do. But let us know, Janet, if you have a question for anybody in particular or everyone.
This is for everybody. First, my deep thanks. I have been so moved by today's program. I am increasingly actually taking in how many like-minded people there are, and how nourishing it is to be in this level of connection. My question for all of you is, do you have days when it feels like your receptivity channel has gotten clogged? When you just kind of feel unplugged from your precious mystical connection and your receptivity? And I know, Chelan, you have been particularly moving to me in your clarity about our not distancing ourselves from any part of our experience, not dissing ourselves. But, this is the sort of thing, when it happens to me, I can go into a little panic and self-rejection, and will I ever get it back? And I would just love to hear, first, do you have that experience of, wait, where'd it go? And if so, how you respond to it, how you handle it, hold it.
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
I can jump in. Yes, I do have times when it does seem sort of, I don't know if it's like, what's happening with barometric pressure, or there are a lot of things that I suppose could account for the differences. Some days I feel very open and the unseen realm feels very, very present. And other days I feel very much embedded in the 3D world. In fact, just last week, I guess it was, I was doing a lot of work on the computer and my website and stuff, which I haven't yet bridged that. I haven't yet managed to bring like the mystical sensibility into tech challenges. I'm working on that.
That wipes me out too.
But I was wanting to get a lot accomplished because there are some new programs that I'm starting up, and always there's that initial momentum that you have to get going. And so I was a little bit in hyperdrive in my mind. And so I went out for a walk, and you know how the mind, like there are just all these little micro tasks to be done, and they're churning and churning. So I went out on a walk, and I just was enjoying looking at the plants and, all the different colors of plants, and walking by these great trees in our neighborhood. And so I just stopped alongside one of the trees, and I just leaned up against it. I'm going to become known as the crazy lady who leans up against trees. But I just lean there, and trees. If you're ever feeling disconnected, find a tree. Because I was just leaning up against this tree, and I was just getting this. Okay, so the tree spoke to me, however you want to take that. But I was feeling like the tree's energy giving me one word, which was allow. Allow. And I just let myself sink into that. Allow. And then as I was walking back home, I was telling myself, I'm not going to hurt myself trying to get all of these things in place, like in a certain period of time. And as soon as I thought that, I had that heart glow experience, like affirmation from the spirit realm. Yes, please do not hurt yourself. Like just live gently, accept what is. Don't pressure yourself. Don't diss yourself. Don't judge yourself. Just allow yourself to be in the flow.
Nice.
I just want to add on that question. It's a great question. I used to really worry about it, mainly because once I got on the path, I really wanted to continue on that path. And when things would get kind of quiet, I thought that I was doing something wrong. And so then you go through those, all of those feelings of what else do I need to do? The efforting then starts. But, what it all comes down to, we mentioned earlier about the integration process, that this is an integration process. So we may have loads and loads of downloads and new information and expansion, and then we need time to, for things to just integrate and to begin to hold, a larger field. And that may feel at times really quiet. It may feel like there's just not much going on, and maybe we're just called to just allow, to be quiet and still and allow. And those are just as important. Those periods of time are just as important as the times where we have things pouring in.
Yeah. I know I get up very early in the morning, and that's my time. And if I ever get drawn I want to check something on the internet first, that's very disruptive. So I really keep kind of a routine, and I think I'm very, I just loved Thomas Merton and, a lot of the old Catholic scholarly monk types. And I could just live so easily in routine and reading and quiet. So yeah, but it does throw me off if I do something first.
I'll just share briefly, just to validate or to second what Mary said. Right before this major breakthrough was the driest 2-year period of my creative life. I wrote like maybe 5 poems or something. And I was just like, okay, muse is gone. It's found someone else. I'm screwed. It's mundane life from here. So I agree. There was just something going on inside of myself, this quiet before the storm. And those times are important, and they're hard. I also want to validate that they can be so hard. It can feel like God has abandoned us. But those quiet times are, there's something happening there. They're the winters where our being is readying itself for a new spring. And then also just on a more micro level, my way, and I love how we all have our different access points. And for me, if I'm feeling disconnected from receiving the flow, the muse, it always means I need to have a big cathartic cry. And it just means my channels are clogged, and I need to, stay with some feelings with love. And that's kind of the ticket for me to have this big, beautiful, cathartic experience where I let go of whatever is, keeping things, stuck and closed. And almost always after a big cry for me, a poem comes right through. It's a great question, Janet. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Chelan. It reminds me of the saying I saw once that said, whoever you're seeking to become, you already are. Just strip away everything except for the love and abide in that love. And that was very powerful. Well, speaking of powerful, this has been an awesome time together. I want to thank everyone who's participated, even those who have had questions and shared, but particularly for our panelists, for Chelan, Mari, and Patricia. We're so grateful to each of you, really, for just being who you are, a transcendent voice, sort of a portal of divine wisdom and grace in this time we live, which needs it so much. So we wish you each many, many blessings in your work ahead, and we definitely look forward to keeping in touch and being together again in whatever format that would be. I want to remind before we sign off to remember our next program is coming up in just 4 weeks. On November 14th, we'll welcome Rabbi Sheila Weinberg, who's an activist, a spiritual director, and a creator of the Jewish mindfulness movement. Certainly another visionary leader and a powerful voice for our time. So mark your calendar for that in 4 weeks. And remember, for those who are new, to check out our resources and our other videos on our website, contemporarymysticism.org, because you'll find a lot of folks that you will love, including Mari and Mary Reed and Patricia, all have other programs they've done on there. And so be sure and check that out. So we're so grateful for each of you that you were here. And we'll say as we begin to sign off, until we meet again, be well, be loved, and remember that you are perfect just as you are. Namaste.
Thank you
so much.
Stay
connected.
Thank you,
Reach out
everyone.
to us.
Love
Thank
to
you
all.
all.
Blessings.
Bye.
Thank you. Godspeed.